When Donald Trump walked into a small roadside cafe, no one could believe their eyes. Why did a man who could afford the most exquisite restaurants in the world end up in this humble establishment? Waitress Mia had no idea that this night would change her life forever. The neon sign flickered above the quiet roadside diner, casting a faint glow onto the cracked pavement. Inside, the evening rush was beginning to die down, leaving only a handful of travelers nursing their coffee cups. The smell of sizzling burgers and freshly brewed coffee lingered in the air, mixing with the faint scent of rain from the storm that had passed earlier. Mia, a 28-year-old waitress, had just wiped down the last of the tables when the bell above the door jingled. She turned to see a man stepping inside with the kind of confidence that demanded attention. He was tall, dressed in a crisp navy suit, though slightly wrinkled from travel. His unmistakable golden hair was neatly combed back, and the stern expression on his face made it clear that he wasn't just another weary traveler stopping for a quick meal. Mia's breath hitched in her throat when recognition dawned on her. Donald Trump. The Donald Trump. She had seen his face on television, on billboards, and newspapers. He was a figure larger than life, a businessman, a former president, a controversial icon. What was he doing in a tiny, nondescript diner in the middle of nowhere? Mia quickly straightened her apron and tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. She had dealt with all kinds of customers over the years, from kind-hearted truck drivers to impatient tourists, but this was something else entirely. As Trump scanned the diner, his sharp blue eyes landed on her. "Table for one?" she asked, her voice steadier than she expected. He nodded, glancing around as if assessing the establishment. Something quiet. Mia led him to a booth in the far corner, away from the few remaining customers. She handed him a menu, but he barely glanced at it before setting it aside. Just a burger, medium rare, no onions, and a coffee, black. She jotted down the order, trying not to let her hands shake. Coming right up. As she turned to leave, Trump's voice stopped her. "Busy night?" Mia hesitated before answering. "Not too bad. Slows down around this time." He nodded, tapping a finger against the table. "Hard work, waitressing. Not easy keeping up." Something about the comment caught her off guard. It wasn't said with arrogance or indifference, but rather with a certain level of understanding. She gave a small smile. "It keeps me on my toes." "That's the trick," Trump said, leaning back slightly. "Keep moving forward." Mia walked back to the counter, trying to shake the strange feeling settling over her. This wasn't just another customer. There was an energy in the air, something heavy yet unspoken. She handed the order to the cook and poured a fresh cup of coffee. As she carried it back to his table, she stole a glance at him. He was sitting with his hands clasped, staring at nothing in particular, lost in thought. It was a rare sight. Trump, the man who always seemed to be in control, looking almost reflective. She placed the coffee in front of him. "Here you go." He looked up, offering a small nod. "Thank you." Mia returned to the counter, but her curiosity got the best of her. She had served celebrities before, politicians, musicians, even a few actors, but none of them had this presence. She watched as Trump took a slow sip of his coffee, his gaze fixed outside the window where the last remnants of daylight were fading into darkness. When the burger was ready, she brought it over, carefully setting the plate down. "Enjoy." Trump picked up the burger, inspecting it briefly before taking a deliberate bite. He chewed thoughtfully, nodding slightly. "Good burger. Simple." Mia chuckled. "I'll let the cook know." For a few minutes, he ate in silence while she attended to the remaining tables. The last of the customers left, leaving only Trump and an old man sipping his coffee at the counter. The jukebox hummed a soft, slow tune, filling the otherwise quiet space. Mia was wiping down the counter when Trump raised a hand slightly, signaling her over. She approached, careful to keep her expression neutral. "Everything all right?" she asked. "Perfect," he replied, wiping his mouth with a napkin. "One of the best burgers I've had in a while." She laughed lightly. "Well, we aim to please." For a moment, he simply looked at her. Not in the way most men did, not with impatience or expectation, but with something unreadable. Then he spoke. "You've got a good energy about you. Reminds me of someone." Mia blinked, unsure how to respond. "Well, thank you, I guess." He nodded once, as if finalizing a thought. "It's a rare thing." Then, Without another word, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a few crisp bills, placing them on the table along with a folded piece of paper. "Keep the change," he said, standing up, "and read this when you get a moment." Mia stared at the note, her heart pounding. "Thank you," she said softly, but he was already walking toward the door. The bell jingled as he stepped outside, disappearing into the night. For a few moments, she stood frozen by the booth, staring at the note as if it might burn her fingers. What could he have possibly written? And why did he seem so intent on her reading it? But the questions would have to wait. There were still things to clean up, and Mia wasn't the type to leave her duties unfinished, even if her mind was racing with anticipation. By the time Mia finished closing up, the diner was empty and silent. She finally sat down in the very booth Trump had occupied, her fingers trembling as she unfolded the note. Her eyes scanned the first few lines, and her breath hitched. Asterisco, asterisco, dear Mia, asterisco, asterisco. I don't know much about you, but I've seen something rare tonight. True resilience. Watching how you handle this place, how you carry yourself, it reminds me of someone who meant a lot to me. Life isn't easy, but people like you keep the world turning. That's why I want to do something, no strings attached. Asterisk, asterisk. Mia's hands began to shake as she continued reading. I'm leaving a small gesture for you to use however you see fit. Whether it's for your child, your future, or simply a moment of rest, I hope it brings you some peace. People like you deserve to be seen, and I see you. Asterisk, asterisk. Folded inside the note was a check. Mia's heart nearly stopped when she saw the amount. Asterisk, asterisk, $10, 000. Asterisk, asterisk. Her knees buckled, and she sat down hard on the bench. Tears pricked at her eyes, overwhelming her. It wasn't just the money, though that alone could change everything. It was the words, the acknowledgement, the feeling that someone as accomplished and powerful as Donald Trump had noticed her, had cared enough to do something. It was overwhelming. And yet, one question lingered in her mind. Why her? And what was she going to do with this unexpected gift? Mia sat frozen in the empty diner, the check still clutched in her trembling hands. The number on the piece of paper blurred as unshed tears clouded her vision. $10,000. It was more than she had ever imagined receiving in a single moment. More than a generous tip, this was life-changing money. But beyond the financial relief, it was the note's words that truly struck her. People like you deserve to be seen. And I see you. For years, Mia had felt invisible, just another overworked waitress in an endless cycle of bills, exhaustion, and sacrifice for her son. Yet in the span of a quiet evening, Donald Trump, a man who had likely dined in the most luxurious places in the world, had not only noticed her, but had recognized something in her that she often doubted in herself. Strength, resilience, worth. Asterisk, asterisk. Her breath hitched as she glanced around, half expecting him to return, to tell her it had been some kind of mistake. But the only sound in the diner was the hum of the fluorescent lights above and the ticking of the old clock mounted on the wall. It was past closing time, but she couldn't bring herself to move. The weight of the check in her hands felt heavier than the struggles she had carried for so long. She exhaled shakily and folded the note back, placing it inside her apron pocket. The check she held onto for a moment longer, running her thumb over the ink as if to convince herself it was real. What was she supposed to do now? Her first instinct was to call Tasha. Her best friend would know what to say, would share in her disbelief and excitement. But as Mia reached for her phone, a wave of doubt crashed over her. Did she even deserve this? The thought unsettled her. She had worked hard all her life, struggling to provide for her son without asking for handouts. Was this different? It wasn't charity, not really. Trump had made it clear it came with no strings attached. But still, the question gnawed at her. Why her? She swallowed the lump in her throat and slipped the check into her purse before standing. Her legs felt unsteady as she moved to the diner's front door, locking it for the night. With one last glance at the booth where he had sat, she flicked off the lights and stepped out into the cool night air. Mia didn't sleep much that night. She lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling while Jordan snored softly beside her. The little apartment was quiet except for the occasional creak of the pipes and the distant hum of cars on the highway. The money sat on the nightstand, untouched, She thought about all the ways it could help. The overdue rent, the grocery bill that always stretched her paycheck thin, Jordan's school needs, new shoes, a proper backpack, a birthday party that wasn't just cupcakes at the kitchen table. Then another thought crept in. What if this wasn't just about making ends meet? What if this was her chance to change things, really change them? Asterisk, asterisk. For years, Mia had dreamed of going back to school, of studying finance, and escaping the cycle of endless shifts and aching feet. It had always seemed impossible, but now, she turned her head to look at Jordan, his small body curled beneath the blankets. He deserved a mother who wasn't always exhausted, who could afford to give him more than just the bare minimum. Maybe this money wasn't just a gift. Maybe it was a door opening, a door she had convinced herself would never be for her. By morning, Mia had made her decision. She packed Jordan's lunch, walked him to school, and instead of heading straight home, she drove to the nearest bank. The check felt almost sacred in her hands as she handed it to the teller, her heart hammering in her chest. The young woman behind the counter raised an eyebrow at the amount, but said nothing, simply nodding as she processed the deposit. "Would you like to move a portion of this to a savings account?" she asked politely. Mia hesitated. A savings account. She had never been able to keep one. Every dollar she made had to be spent immediately, leaving no room for the luxury of saving. "Yes," she said finally. "I'd like that." As she left the bank, something inside her shifted. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was merely surviving. She felt like she was moving forward. That afternoon, Mia sat at her tiny kitchen table, scrolling through the website of a nearby community college. Her fingers hovered over the Enroll Now button, nerves threatening to paralyze her. Could she really do this? Go back to school while still working full-time and raising a child? Then she thought about Trump's note. "I see you." Maybe it was time she started seeing herself differently too. With a deep breath, she clicked the button. A week later, Mia's routine had already begun to change. She still worked her shifts at the diner, still walked Jordan to school, but now, in the evenings, she attended her first online finance classes. The exhaustion remained, but it was different, less like a burden and more like momentum pushing her forward. Her coworkers noticed the shift in her. She smiled more, carried herself with a quiet confidence she hadn't had before. Tasha, when she finally told her, had screamed so loudly over the phone that Mia had to pull it away from her ear. "Girl, this is your moment. I knew you were destined for more than that diner." Mia laughed, but the truth was, for the first time, she believed it too. The next time she worked the night shift, she couldn't help but glance at the booth where Trump had sat. She wondered if he had any idea how much he had changed her life with one simple act of kindness. A thought crossed her mind. Asterisk, asterisk, what if she could do the same for someone else? Asterisk, asterisk. Mia reached into her apron pocket, where she had tucked a few extra dollars from tips. As she cleared a table, she discreetly placed a folded bill beneath a napkin, just as someone had once done for her. Maybe this was only the beginning. Mia adjusted the strap of her bag as she stepped into the community college lobby, her heart pounding in her chest. It had been years since she had been in any kind of classroom, and now, standing under the bright fluorescent lights, surrounded by students young and old, she felt a mixture of excitement and fear. The check from Donald Trump had given her the chance to change her life, and she was determined not to waste it. She clutched her course schedule tightly in one hand and took a deep breath. "You can do this," she whispered to herself. As she walked toward her first class, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was the start of something much bigger than she had ever imagined. Back at the diner, things were beginning to shift. Mia had always been a hard worker, but now she carried herself differently. Her coworkers noticed it, her boss noticed it, even the regular customers noticed it. There was a quiet determination in her steps, a light in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "Mia, you seem different," said Tom, one of the older regulars who had been coming to the diner for years. He was a retired truck driver, always sitting at the counter with his black coffee and newspaper. She smiled as she poured him another cup. "Just trying to make some changes, Tom." He raised an eyebrow. "Good changes, I hope?" She nodded. "The best kind." The truth was, for the first time in her life, she felt like she had control over her own future. The money Trump had given her wasn't just helping her pay bills. It was giving her a chance to dream again. And with every class she attended, Every new financial term she learned, she could see a future beyond waitressing. But it wasn't just about her anymore. The idea of helping others, of paying forward the kindness she had received, stayed in the back of her mind. She thought about the single parents who worked alongside her, struggling just as much as she had. She thought about the customers who came in late at night, counting their change before ordering the cheapest meal on the menu. She wanted to do more. One evening, Mia's shift was winding down when a young woman walked into the diner. She looked exhausted, her clothes wrinkled, her face pale. She sat at the counter, nervously glancing around, as if unsure whether she should even be there. Mia approached with a warm smile. "Hey there, what can I get you?" The woman hesitated, then spoke in a quiet voice. "Just a coffee, please." Mia nodded and poured her a fresh cup. As she set it down, she noticed the woman's hands were shaking. "Rough day." The woman gave a small, tired laugh. "More like a rough year." Mia leaned against the counter. "I hear you on that one. Anything I can do to help?" The woman sighed, looking down at the cup in front of her. "I lost my job last month. Been looking for work, but it's been hard. My rent's overdue, and I don't know how much longer I can hold out." Mia tightened. She knew that feeling all too well. A year ago, she had been in the exact same position, barely scraping by, unsure of how she would make it to the next month. Without hesitating, Mia reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a folded bill. She slid it across the counter. "This should cover your next meal, and maybe a little more." The woman's eyes widened. I can't take this." Mia smiled gently. "Yes, you can. Someone once did something kind for me, and now it's my turn to pass it along. No strings attached." Tears welled up in the woman's eyes as she hesitated, then slowly took the money. "Thank you. You don't know how much this means." Mia felt a warmth spread through her chest. "I think I do." As the woman took a deep breath and sipped her coffee, Mia realized that this was exactly what she wanted to do. Helping others wasn't about grand gestures or making headlines. It was about the small moments, the quiet kindnesses that could change someone's life, just like Trump's gesture had changed hers. Over the next few weeks, Mia began setting aside a small portion of her tips. Some nights it was only a few dollars, but she didn't care. She kept a small envelope in her purse labeled "Pay It Forward Fund." Whenever she saw someone in need, whether it was a struggling mother, a student who couldn't afford their meal, or an elderly customer who came in just to escape the cold, she quietly found a way to help. It wasn't about repaying Trump. She knew she'd never be able to do that. But his kindness had sparked something in her, a belief that even the smallest acts of generosity could have a ripple effect. And one evening, the ripple came back to her in the most unexpected way. It was a slow Tuesday night when the bell above the diner's door jingled. Mia turned to greet the customer, but her breath caught in her throat. Donald Trump stood in the doorway. For a moment, she thought she was imagining it. But then he stepped inside, his familiar presence filling the small space. He glanced around, the same sharp eyes taking in the room, before his gaze landed on her. "Still working hard, I see," he said, a small smirk on his lips. Mia quickly wiped her hands on her apron and approached, trying to hide her surprise. "Mr. Trump," she said, offering a smile. "I wasn't expecting to see you again." He shrugged as he took a seat at the same booth he had sat in weeks ago. "I was passing through. Thought I'd stop by." She swallowed, her heart pounding. Was this just a coincidence? Or had he come back for a reason? "The usual?" she asked. He nodded. "And a coffee. Black." As Mia walked back to the kitchen, she felt a strange mix of emotions. Gratitude, nerves, excitement. But mostly, she wanted him to know what he had done for her. When she brought out his meal, she hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I wanted to say thank you for what you did." Trump raised an eyebrow. "What did I do?" She smiled. "You saw me. You helped me when I didn't even know I needed it. And because of that, I've been able to help others too. I just thought you should know that." For a moment, he said nothing. Then, a slow smile crossed his face. "That's how it works, doesn't it? You lift someone up, and they do the same for someone else." Mia nodded, feeling the truth of his words settle deep within her. He took a sip of his coffee and leaned back in his seat. "You're going to do all right, kid." And in that moment, Mia knew he was right. This wasn't just about one night or one act of kindness. This was the beginning of something much bigger. Mia stood in the diner, watching as Donald Trump took another sip of his coffee, his expression unreadable. It was strange how life worked. A few weeks ago, she had been just another waitress struggling to get by, invisible to most. And now, here she was sitting across from a man who had unknowingly changed her life. He set his cup down and looked at her with a small smirk. "So, what did you do with it?" Mia blinked, momentarily thrown off. "The money?" Trump nodded. "Yeah, what did you do with it?" She exhaled slowly. "Well, I didn't blow it on a fancy vacation, if that's what you're wondering." He chuckled. "I didn't think you would." Mia hesitated, then leaned forward slightly. "I put some of it toward bills, of course. Rent, school for my son. But most of it, I invested in myself. I enrolled in college. I'm studying finance." Trump raised an eyebrow. "Finance, huh?" She nodded. "Yeah, I want to understand money, how it works, how to make it work for me. I don't want to struggle my whole life. I don't want my son to see me scraping by, thinking that's the only way to live." Something in Trump's eyes shifted, a glint of approval. "Smart move." "It was because of you," she admitted, feeling her throat tighten. "I never thought I'd get a chance like this. But you gave me one. And now, I want to do the same for others." His gaze sharpened. "How so?" Mia took a deep breath. "I've started setting aside money to help people who are where I used to be. Not a handout, but a hand up. I know what it's like to feel stuck, to think there's no way out. And if I can help even one person believe in themselves the way you made me believe in myself, then it's worth it." Trump leaned back, folding his arms across his chest. He studied her for a long moment before nodding. "That's the right mindset. Giving back, but making sure people have to take the step themselves." Mia smiled. "Exactly." The diner was mostly empty now. The only sounds the faint hum of the jukebox and the occasional clink of dishes from the kitchen. Trump finished his coffee and set the cup down with finality. "You remind me of someone," he said finally. "A long time ago, I knew a guy who started with nothing. Worked hard, never gave up. That kind of resilience, you don't see it often." Mia swallowed. "Did he make it?" Trump smirked. "Yeah, he made it." She let out a small laugh, shaking her head. "I don't know where I'll end up, but I know I'm not stuck anymore. And that means everything." Trump reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out something, another folded note. He placed it on the table and slid it toward her. Mia hesitated before picking it up. "What's this?" "Call it your next step," he said cryptically. "Open it when you get home." She studied him, searching for any hint of what he meant, but his expression gave nothing away. "Thank you," she said softly. He gave her a small nod, then stood up. "Keep moving forward, Mia. That's the trick." With that, he turned and walked out of the diner, disappearing into the night just as he had the first time. Mia sat there for a long time, staring at the folded note in her hands. Finally, she slipped it into her pocket and went to finish her shift, her mind racing with possibilities. Later that night, when Jordan was fast asleep and the apartment was silent except for the occasional creak of the old pipes, Mia sat at her kitchen table and unfolded the note. Her breath caught in her throat. Inside was another check, $52,000. Her hands trembled as she read the brief message scrawled in bold, confident handwriting. "Invest in yourself. Invest in others. Keep moving forward. Asterisk, asterisk." A tear slipped down her cheek as she pressed the note to her chest. She had thought the first gift had changed her life. But this was something else entirely. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was building something, a future, a purpose, a legacy. And she knew, without a doubt, that this was only the beginning.